Hello and welcome to episode 32 of Little Big Knits. My name is Selma, I'm your host. I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Canada, and you can find me as Selma Knits on Instagram and Ravelry. We also on Ravelry have a group called Little Big Knits where you're welcome to come and join in any of the conversations happening there. We currently have the Garments Galore Cal going on, which I'm co-hosting with Kate of the Hawthorne Cottage Craft podcast, and that knit along and crochet is also accepted will be ending on December 31st. So we have had so many entries this year. It's been absolutely a wonderful knit along, and there's still time to post sweaters. So if you have knit a sweater this year or several, feel free to come into my group as well as Kate's group and post your sweaters. Although I should be a little bit more inclusive about garments, it's not just sweaters. It could be cardigans, vests, skirts, anything that we wear as clothing, not accessories. So a shawl wouldn't count. But a poncho, I've accepted some ponchos because in a way they are kind of like a garment. They serve more of that purpose as a jacket or covering of ourselves in some way. So anyway, feel free to join in that fun, and I'm can't wait to see all the last sweaters that are be coming in the next month or so. At the end, I'll be probably posting a separate giveaway video for those people who participated to draw prize winners for the knit along for this year. So yeah, and then in the group you can also introduce yourself. You can usually find show notes, although I find that I'm getting a little bit lazy with show notes, excuse me. I know that some people put them in the down bar here in YouTube, and I've been sort of considering doing that. So we'll see if that ends up happening. I haven't quite looked into how to link things and so forth, so we'll have to see if I end up doing that. And yeah, so thank you for joining me today. If you're new, welcome to Little Big Knits. And to those of you who are returning, thank you for coming back again. We have a beautiful day here in Ottawa, sunny and cool. I do hope to be going for a walk with a friend later and out for dinner, which is great. The family is all out and about doing different things, so I thought it's podcast day. when everybody's away. And I find also that I start really wanting to share and talk about my knitting. So I know that I'm gearing up to podcasting when I start thinking about what I want to say about things and so forth. So here we are on this Saturday in November. Before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about the video that you saw in the introduction with some lovely Irish-like music. Those two places, Derry and Kilcar, are places that I visited in Ireland, and I'll be telling you all about my trip at the end of the podcast, and there'll be lots and lots of footage as well. Hopefully not too much, but for those of you who have an appetite for that, you're welcome to stay to the end and watch it. I like putting together the videos. It's a nice memory for me as well, so I'll watch it over and over again. I have to say, the beginnings and the ends of my videos sometimes, if I want to remember a particular trip or period or whatever, that, you know, things that happened. So anyway, at the beginning I sort of showed you the most knit-worthy of the footage that I got in Ireland. Derry is a town where Derry Girls, if you happen to watch that on Netflix, that's where it is based. And we went there to the Adele McBride shop to see her shop and chat with her, and I did pick up some yarn, so I'll be telling you a little bit about that later. She had some beautiful yarn that's all spun by Studio Donegal, which was in the next footage, which took place in Kilcar, in the northwest corner in the Republic of Ireland. And we went to the Donegal region, which was absolutely stunning, and our trip to Studio Donegal was really, really beautiful. And so you saw some of the weavers. Well, you saw one weaver in particular, but there were three working. Actually, you saw two, the hands of one and the other one actually weaving. The first one was preparing the loom, and these are gentlemen that have been working there for a long time and are dedicated weavers. And that was just an absolutely wonderful experience to see Studio Donegal. So if you're, or Donegal. Anyway, if you're ever in Ireland, I highly recommend it. It was absolutely wonderful, a delight. I could have spent my entire life's earnings there. I did not. I did come away with some gift yarn, as well as some yarn for myself, and a blanket, which I'll show you later, as well as a little bit of cloth that they create. It was absolutely beautiful. So, and in my cup of tea today, which is a cup that Kate brought me last summer, if you'll recall, if you've been around, she came to visit last June, July for my birthday, and she brought me this cup, which is a representation of the Giant's Causeway on the coast, eastern coast of Ireland, and we went there as well during our trip. So I'm drinking my tea out of this today, and I'm drinking Pumpkin Spice by David's Tea. So, on to some knitting. I've got quite a few FOs for you. Last time I showed you a baby hat that I was working on. The hat was gifted, finished and gifted, and is being worn by a newborn. It was a little bit big for the newborn, but they were so thrilled to receive a knitted hat that they had him wearing it anyway. And I'll just put a picture in here of the actual hat. This was the Tegan's Baby Hat by Julie Taylor, and I made it in some alpaca baby silk from Sadness Garn, I believe, that I showed you last time. And that was a real quick knit. It was a really nice little finished object. I really loved the way the knot was created at the top, and it was just a cute little pattern. It was great. I will definitely make that again. The other thing that I showed you guys last time was the towel that I was working on, and I have since finished that. So this was just some leftover cotton linen blend from Katia. So it was the Katia linen. I had made my calyx sweater by Elizabeth Doherty, and I had some left over, and I had actually enough to make the whole towel. I thought I was going to have to mix the beige that I had used for my calyx with the gray that I had used for my Farallon cardigan, but in the end I had enough just in the beige to finish the towel. And it was something that I made on the bias, so it started in the corner until I got to the width that I wanted, and then it finished by decreases at the end, a sort of a typical bias construction. I didn't really block it, I just wet it, so I have to say the edges are a little bit wonky, but if I had blocked it, they would have come out a little bit more square. But that's okay. It's going to be a towel in our bathroom very soon now that I've showed it to you. So there you go. So that was the second one. I think I made this on 4mm needles, and it's just in garter, so it came out quite a nice, sort of nice looseness to it. Not too dense, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to using it. I'll report back at some point. Let's see, where should I throw this now? The other thing I had to show you, and I don't think I had cast this on the last time, but I had bought the yarn. I bought some yarn at the Wakefield Farmers Market. They were having a wool day. Riverside Studios was there, and I showed you a skein of yarn, and I really needed a pair of dark socks. Most of my socks, as I had mentioned to you, are light colored. And I got kind of excited about this yarn and cast on some socks probably soon after I podcasted, or just before I left for Ireland, and I ended up knitting quite a bit of the socks in Ireland. And I had also made sort of a pledge to myself that I wanted to use different fibers this year if I were going to make socks. This wasn't necessarily the case. This is an MCN base, and it's a one-of-a-kind colorway by Riverside Studios, but I was very excited about it, and I'd been wanting to cast on the Pebbles and Pathway socks for a while, since Marceline Smith published the pattern. When was that? Like a half a year ago at least. And I had bought the pattern and just had no sock mojo really. So this yarn actually has revived my sock mojo. They are on these wonderful wooden sock blockers from Norway by Patricia P4 Chen on Instagram. She makes these beautiful sock blockers. So I can show off my socks. So this is the Pebbles and Pathways, and look at that, is exactly what the color should look like. It's browns and purples, and so it gives this just stunning, stunning, stunning color. I am so in love, and the stitch definition for this pattern is beautiful. And they fit, it uses the a nice gusset. Now I have to be honest, once I got into the stitch pattern, I didn't really follow the instructions of the sock so much, because I just really wanted to be able to do this gusset, but it's basically the same as Marceline had, and I used a recipe by Wendy D. Johnson, just because I have that in my head, and I don't know, I just didn't want it to be too complicated for myself while I was traveling. But really, I am so in love with these socks, and now that I've showed them to you, they're going to go on my feet. Yeah. So they just came out beautifully. It's a really, really lovely pattern. Just a simple cable with some garter in between, and it just creates a really nice stitch definition. Just neat little details that I wouldn't have expected, and really nicely done. So very well done, Marceline. What a wonderful pattern. And with this yarn, I'm just in love. So I will be knitting some more socks, and my next socks will be knit in mohair, a mohair yarn that I've had in my stash for quite a long time. It's a mohair sock yarn. I'll show it to you right now. Actually, although now that I mention it, I'm kind of realizing that I probably want to make sure that there's nylon on this, but I'm pretty sure there is. But it's a mohair, I'm pretty sure it's a mohair wool nylon blend. As you can see, I've knit with this already. I started to make a top out of it and then realized it was too variegated for that, because I have 2 skeins of this. So this is going to become a pair of socks, and quite soon, I think, because now I've got a bit of sock mojo. And then the last FO, which is the FO that I'm wearing, I showed this to you last time. I was working on it. It is a modified version of the Edith cardigan by Pam Allen. It's heavily modified, I have to say. Pam Allen's cardigan Edith is knit in an Aran weight. I think the gauge is something like 16 or 18 stitches. I made mine out of a sport weight yarn. This is Americo yarn, her Surrey Merino base. I think it's called her Baby Surrey. Absolutely stunning yarn that I bought from Americo, which is an online shop. However, she has, I believe at this point, pretty much closed her doors for personal reasons. I've used her yarn in the past, and I absolutely love her yarns. So when she had a 50% sale, I bought this as well as some other yarn later on. And I ended up using this, and which is a sports weight, and so a finer gauge. So I needed to make I think I ended up making a much larger size than I needed to in order to get the size that I wanted. But then I also modified the pattern. I think I mentioned this to you guys last time. It's meant to be a bottom up. I wanted it to be a top down. I added short row shaping to both sides, the front and the back, on both shoulders, which was not in the pattern. I didn't add pockets. She had pockets in the original. So really what I was taking was inspiration from it as well as the stitch pattern. And this cardigan, or what I made as a vest, is absolutely stunning. While I was knitting it, I kept thinking that this might go to a friend of mine. So when I see this friend, I'm going to ask her if she likes it, because I think it's, in a way, I think it would look really good on her. I like the color. I've grown to be comfortable with the color. But if this looks great on her and if she likes it, I think I'm going to be giving it to her, because I've been wanting to knit her something for quite a while. We'll see. If not, I will likely keep it. So I'm going to do a stand-up, but this is going to be a little bit awkward because it's really long. The cardigan is a long pattern, and I decided that I wanted this to be long as well. And I really like the length. I think this is going to look great with a blouse and pants, or with a blouse and a skirt. I think it's just going to be awesome. And if I do end up giving it to my friend, and possibly even if I don't, I think I'll be making myself another one. I have some other yarn by Americo. Actually, why don't I just show it to you, and then I'll show you the sweater. This yarn here, which is a wool linen blend. I don't think there's anything else. It's called Brisa. It's got a bit of a tweediness to it. I've thought that this might be neat as a vest as well. I bought this at Twist Fiber Festival 3 years ago, I think, and I've struggled with what to make with it. At first I was going to make the Granito by Jochi Locatelli, and then I somehow lost my steam with that, and so I think this could end up becoming a second Edith. We'll see. So anyway, let me show this to you. I'm very, very happy. I finished this while I was in Ireland. I became a knitting machine, but I had a lot of time on the planes, and then during the trip we were at a retreat where everybody was knitting all the time, so I was knitting all the time, and then when we were on our road trip with Kate, she was driving, so I was knitting, and I just ended up finishing it. So let me show it to you. It's got this wonderful, what do you call that? Is that a fisherman's rib on the front? But it's also got it on the back. So it's got it on the back until about the mid-back right there. So it's a really nice detail. And then I'm going to get up on this chair so you can see that it goes down to about here. And it's just got a really nice looseness to it. With I totally see this at work with heels. And there you go. Just sits really nicely. It's loose. It's got enough ease in it. I had thought that I was going to maybe do some A-line shaping to it, but I realized that I really didn't need to. It was going to have the ease. I just didn't want it hugging my behind. And yeah, so what can I say? It was a really enjoyable knit. The body started getting a little long and a little tedious, but it was really enjoyable to the point where I'd make a second one. I think this is going to be a very useful thing to have in a repertoire. So if my friend is not interested in having it, then I will find a way. Well, I'll be wearing it. I don't know that it's something that I would put on every day because of its shocking color. Shocking for me, maybe not somebody else. But definitely it's cozy, it's comfy. Even though it's quite long, it's light and drapey and just a really nice thing to wear. So there you go. This is the 4th finished object for this episode. I had been away for a while, and there were a lot of things that just needed finishing, which got finished very quickly after I podcasted last time. So before we move on to the works in progress, I wanted to have a little giveaway. You'll recall that I made, well, if you've been around, you may recall that I made these fingerless gloves last year. And I ended up making a second pair, actually, which I usually keep at the office, and I wear these all the time, and I just love them. And I don't know if you notice anything, but they look great. That's what you should be noticing. They look great. This yarn, which is this yarn here by Bijou Basin, their Himalayan Summit, which is a 50% yak down and 50% superfine merino, is the yarn that I used, of course, in a different color, in purple. And I have just been so incredibly impressed with this yarn. I had gotten a skein for the podcast to give away at some point. And since we have hit the 6,000 mark, I thought I would have a little giveaway to celebrate that. And also, I would very much like to celebrate this company. Well, I feel sad saying this at this point because Bijou Basin has decided to also close their doors. So Amerigo, whose yarn I love, and Bijou Basin, whose yarn I've really enjoyed working with, have both closed their doors. But I think somebody needs to have the chance to work with this yarn because it really is spectacular. You could make 2 pairs of these. You could make a hat, add it to a shawl, for example, or for color work in a sweater, but it's honestly absolutely beautiful yarn to work with. So if you're interested in potentially winning this yarn, just put a comment down below here in YouTube. You can tell me what you're working on, whatever it may be. Maybe it's not even knitting, perhaps it's not even yarn related. Maybe you're sewing or embroidering or doing something else. And maybe you're not working on anything, which is perfectly fine. And you can just say, I'm not working on anything right now. That's fine as well. Or if you just want to leave another kind of comment there, that's fine as well. But yeah, and then what I'll do is usually when I have a giveaway, when people post comments down below in YouTube, I don't tend to comment or respond, whereas I usually do otherwise. So I'll just be acknowledging it by a heart or a thumbs up. And then at the end, when I podcast next, which will probably be before Christmas, I would imagine, I will draw a winner, and you can tell me where you live and I will send this to you. Anybody can join in, by the way, no matter where you are. I'm happy to send it to absolutely any part of the world. So thank you for subscribing and for watching and sticking around. I have so enjoyed doing this podcast, and I hope to do many, many more. I started this 2.5 years ago, although I was podcasting as a guest on the Two Tangled Skeins, and I hope to podcast for many, many more episodes. So there you go. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with me. All right, on to works in progress. I told you last time that I was going, I think I showed you, did I show it to you? Some socks that my friend Antoine had been making for his partner Paul. And Paul and I have been friends for many, many years, since first year university. And Antoine was struggling to make them. I think the needle size and the gauge was a little bit hard on his hand, so I said, give them to me and I'll finish them, because I have been meaning to make Paul a pair of socks for a long time. So Paul will finally get a pair of socks. I am working on those socks at lunchtime when I can at work, and unfortunately I forgot to bring them home to show you. But I have been working on them, and so maybe next time I'll be able to show them to you before I send them off or deliver them to Paul in Montreal. So that's one thing that I've been working on. Then after I finished this and I finished the socks, I think I misinformed you a little earlier. I think I finished this like at the end of the first weekend that I was in Ireland. So I was just knitting out this like crazy. And I had the socks, which I was happy to be working on, but I hadn't brought any other knitting projects with me, which I realize I will not do again. That was a little crazy because I don't really normally, like I'll knit for quite a while in a pair of socks, but I don't consider it a main project somehow. I don't know. I just felt, suddenly I thought, I'm going to finish those socks and then I'm going to have nothing to work on. That was just about when we were starting our road trip to the north, and we stopped at the Adele McBride store. And I ended up buying some yarn there, which is spun, as I said, by Studio Donegal. And I was all excited about this yarn and had multiple ideas of what to do with it, and then I decided that I was going to improvise a cardigan. And so the yarn is this here. It's a very, I would say, Aran, almost chunky weight, very rustic. How many plies is that? Looks like there are 3 plies, and it's quite a rustic feeling yarn. I swatched, I'm using a 5.5 millimeter needle to knit the cardigan. And in the last couple of days, I have somehow started to question whether I'm gonna like this cardigan. And I'm not in the mood to try it on for you. But yesterday, after finishing the second sleeve and realizing that I would need to go back and re-knit the first sleeve, but before I pulled it out, I tried it on and I just wasn't thrilled with the fit. And it's a rather thick yarn. It doesn't have drape to it, and I wondered if I had really made the right decision. Oh, what the hey, I'll try it on. I think showing it to you might help me understand how I feel about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. There's just something about the way that it sits that I'm starting to think, Now, of course, it's going to have a ribbing here, so it will close that in a little bit. And it's a V-neck. And I have to redo the bottom because it's totally flipping up and ugly. But it's got some short row shaping so that it goes down just a little bit here in the front. And so it's a little bit difficult for me to show it to you, and you get right now. But yesterday when I was trying it on, I just thought, I just don't know how I feel about this. Is this what is this what I had in mind? So I've decided not to put it in the naughty corner. I think I'll continue knitting on the sleeve. The first sleeve was too wide, and then I made the second one a little narrower. It's still got a bit of a gap down here, but I'm okay with that because it is meant to be a bit of a layering piece. And this is just perfect. Like it joins quite easily without the ribbing. So with the ribbing, it's going to be a little bit of a looser cardigan. But I'm just really torn about how I feel about this. So I don't know. We'll have to see if it somehow gels in my mind and I continue with it, or if I just decide that's it. Nope, this is not what this yarn is going to become, and it'll become something else. I don't know. We'll see. It's about the same weight as the Quarry by Brooklyn Tweed. So I happened to go to Wabi Sabi, my local yarn shop, and I was looking at the Brooklyn Tweed Quarry. And I think what I'll do is see online. This is a little bit more, a little bit stiffer, I would say, than the Brooklyn Tweed yarn. But I think I'll inspire myself a little bit by some of the projects with the Quarry. And if it turns out that I just realize, nope, then perhaps I'll look at some other potential patterns. Somebody had made the Turtle Dove by Espace Tricot, by Melissa of Espace Tricot, in the Quarry, and they hadn't done the turtleneck. They had just turned it into kind of a long tunic with pockets, and I was like, that's a really great idea. So we'll see. If I'm not convinced about the cardigan, I don't want to waste my yarn and finish it and then never wear it. I'd rather just rip it out and move on to something else. So we'll see. If you happen to have any comments about that, feel free to post below. So yesterday I had one of those days where I was very tired. I hadn't slept well for a couple of nights and I was just exhausted. I ended up staying home and just sleeping and working a little bit on that sweater and just realizing how frustrated I was with that. And then I thought, well, I'll cast on this sock, but I couldn't find these needles, which I don't like anyway. I used these needles for the Pebbles and Pathways socks. These are, I believe, Hayahayas, and I really don't like the joins. So, and I couldn't find them yesterday. If I'd found them, I probably would have cast on the sock, but I couldn't find them. And so I thought, well, I'll go to Wabi Sabi and buy some 2.25 millimeter needles and go home, at least start the sock and finish the day feeling a little bit less frustrated about my knitting and perhaps just less grumpy about everything, because I just felt like tired and grumpy. And then I came home with the wrong size needles from Wabi Sabi, so that didn't go anywhere either. But at the final hour before going to bed, I decided to cast on this stunning yarn combination for a second ranunculus. So it is these two yarns here together to make this sort of icy blue gray ranunculus, which I am housing, by the way, in this stunning bag that Kate made for everybody who came to the retreat. Just beautiful. And it came with a lovely mini skein from Emma of Woolly Mammoth Fibers. So it is now hosting my ranunculus, which is being knit in the lace weight is a 65 silk 35 linen yarn by Ancient Arts. It's their Indulgence base, and this is colorway Pieces of 8. And the other yarn is this Lang Mohair Luxe Lame, which is a super kid mohair. It's actually a mohair, 73%, 18% silk, and 9% polyamide. It is a slightly, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, there you can. It's got a tiny bit of glitter going through it. So I'm going to have a glittery ranunculus. Not very glittery, it's very subtle actually. Both of these yarns are yarns that I bought at Wabi Sabi. This I bought at one point with the idea of making a big wrap. It's now turning into a ranunculus, and I had got this probably 2 years ago. And then when I decided to make a second ranunculus and I saw this gray yarn at Wabi Sabi, I decided that I would pair it with that mohair. And so I started it. However, I might not continue right away because there was some talk of a knit along with Kate and perhaps some other people from the Ullin retreat. And so I might wait until others are able to cast on, if I can. Knitting this last night was an absolute joy. And I love my first ranunculus. It's one of my most worn items in my closet, really. I took the ranunculus with me to Ireland. It goes with me pretty much everywhere. And I also took my All the Love by Hochi Locatelli, which I made last spring, I believe, and I wear that a lot as well. Maybe it was last winter. And I also wore that at the retreat. Those are two things that I wear very often. One thing I want to say is that there are two ways of starting, 2 stitch counts for starting the ranunculus. And I started somewhere in the middle. Somebody was asking me if I had started with the smaller size or the larger size with my last ranunculus, and I thought I had started with the smaller size. And then last night when I went to start this, I realized that there's a whole process where you start with the smaller size, but there are these increases that you do in the cast on to create sort of a mid-range neckline. And I remembered that last time when I cast on my ranunculus, I just didn't want to do that bizarre cast. I don't even know if it's bizarre. I shouldn't call it that because it might be perfectly fine, but I just didn't want to. I just wanted to do my long tail cast on and move on with it. So I noticed that basically in that cast on that you would end up with a certain number of stitches, and so I just cast on that number of stitches, which just makes a really, really nice sort of medium sized neckline. And so that's what I did last night, and yeah, I've just finished the ribbing and I'm supposed to be starting the short row shaping, but as I said, I might hold off for a little bit and wait for a couple of other people who we wanted to have a knit along with. And I think that's really about it as far as works in progress go. Yeah. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about my trip to Ireland. That's essentially it for the knitting content of the podcast. I'll tell you about my trip to Ireland and show you some of the beautiful yarns that came home with me from Ireland, and tell you a little bit about the trip. So feel free to stick around, and of course at the end there will be more footage of the scenes of the trip. I took a lot of footage, so we'll see how long that ends up being. And yeah, so I left on the 30th of October. It was a Wednesday night. I arrived on Thursday, flew through Heathrow. So actually what was really fun is that I met up with Marta of Martuszka Yarns at Heathrow. I sort of went into the UK and we met for a 1-hour coffee, and then I went back in. And you know, when you meet people through the internet, through the podcasts, or through chatting on Instagram or in Ravelry or whatever, it's just so neat to then meet people. And you may recall last year, or was it earlier this year, I made a top called the Perfect Crop Top, and I made it out of yarn that Marta had sent me. And that's another top that I wear often under jackets. So we met at Heathrow for a 1-hour coffee, and it was just absolutely a delight to meet Marta, and I hope and I know we will have the possibility of meeting again. So that was really lovely. And then I flew back. I went back into the airport, so to speak, and checked back in and went to Belfast from there. I arrived in Belfast, and we just relaxed and had dinner, and then the next day we left for the Ullin retreat, which Kate and Emma of Woolly Mammoth Fibers were hosting in a town called Larne, and it was at a beautiful center, which I'll have footage of at the end as well. And we were there with, I think there were 20 of us in total. It was absolutely beautiful. But on the way there, we stopped in a small town, a small Victorian town called Whitehead. Absolutely beautiful little town. And it has a yarn shop. So we stopped at the yarn shop in Whitehead and had lunch at the cafe, which is just adjacent to the yarn shop. The only thing I bought at the yarn shop, don't kill me, was mohair. She had mohair on sale. I thought I really don't need yarn, but when I saw this this sort of beige mohair, sand-colored mohair on sale, I bought it. And I will be making a second anchor sweater. You may recall I made anchors. It was sort of it was a yoke sweater with a ribbing here. I made it in blue in the summer, and I thought I might make another one. I'm going to swatch this with some cream colored yarn and see what the effect, but I might end up making myself a winter anchors, which is kind of a creamy beige color. And that's what I was thinking about doing with this. It was a lovely, lovely yarn shop in Whitehead, and it was wonderful to meet the ladies who were there and spend some time there. It was really nice. And the cafe that's next door is really delicious. So if you happen to go to Whitehead, please make sure to visit the yarn store and the cafe. And actually, here you can see that there are more. These are, I just decided to display them here. I didn't know where to put them. I thought, oh, I'll put them in that little, what do you call this? Bowl of some sort. And so that is the yarn that I got at the store in Whitehead. So then we spent the weekend at the retreat. Aidan, who is also known as the Knitting Monk, he used to have a presence on Instagram, but he no longer does. And he used to also have a podcast, which he no longer does. I absolutely adored his podcast. For its nature of being contemplative and thought-provoking. So he was leading the sort of sessions at the workshop, at the retreat. The retreat was very laid back. It was really nice. There was a lot of sitting around chatting and drinking tea, and we would have sessions with Aidan where we would talk about different aspects of why we make and what making brings us, which was very interesting to articulate a little bit more clearly, at least for me, you know, why I knit. I feel a very strong emotional connection to knitting, and I know that it's related to my family, especially my Finnish side of my family, because all the women have been, well, not all, but not so much the more recent generations, but my grandmother, my mother, my aunt, and I think in my grandmother's generation, there was a lot of making. I showed you guys last time a linen towel that had been woven by a great aunt. There was just a lot of making, and I feel very emotionally connected to that. So it was interesting to think a little bit about why we knit or make. In today's world, there could be a little bit of a sense of, for me, I think there's a bit of a renegade feeling. I feel like I'm making things and that's not the norm. I feel like it, and then that's not why I knit, but it does, I realize, you know, people often look like, oh wow, you're knitting. Like people don't use their hands as much anymore, and so I feel a real pride around that. Anyway, it was really interesting to think a little bit about why do we make? What is it that the making brings us? What is it that we're putting out because of it? You know, and I think knitting has also become very much a source of connection with all the social media. I have a whole community of friends because of knitting, and that is amazing. I think it used to be such a local thing, and in fact, perhaps at some point can be very isolating even. But with podcasts, with knit nights, with Instagram, there's more and more of a chance to connect with one another through our making. So when you stop to think about it, there's such richness to it. And so those were the kinds of conversations that we were led to have at the retreat, and it was really very, very enjoyable and really nice. And there was also a lot of time where you could just go out for a walk. I think people didn't feel like they couldn't just retire and go to their rooms for a little while. It was just a very nice laid back feeling. So congratulations to Kate and Emma for creating such a lovely, lovely retreat and at the Dramalis Center, and I just loved it. And it was a great way when you've got jet lag to just kind of ease into another time zone too. And before I totally forget, because I realized I had also gotten this skein of woolly mammoth. She had brought some yarn to the retreat, and I picked up this one as well as some others that are back there as gifts for people that I haven't had a chance to give to yet. So anyway, this is the one that I picked up for myself. There might be another one in there that I will keep, but I just loved this sort of kind of salmon pink. It's got a tiny little bit of purples going through it. So there we go. So once that was over, we headed back to Belfast, and then on the Monday we did a tour of Belfast on the bus. There's one of those hop-on hop-off buses. Our first stop, and ended up kind of being our only stop, was the Titanic Museum, which is fabulous, by the way. So I would highly recommend the Titanic Museum. And across the street from the Titanic Museum was actually a set for the Game of Thrones. So I'll put in a picture of that. It's not very good because you couldn't get very close, and obviously it's not being used at the moment. I think it was from the last season, and it was a castle that got blown up or something like that. I don't watch Game of Thrones, so I don't really know. But that was kind of neat to think that there was a set right there in the middle of Belfast. And then we spent so much time at the Titanic Museum that we ended up getting back on the tour bus afterwards, or the on and off bus, and just did the tour of the city. And it was a very interesting tour. It was really neat to learn about Belfast in all its different facets, and just see the different parts of the city. It was really, really interesting. And so I highly recommend that as well. Now, we had thought we would go to the yarn store, but the way the day went, we never ended up getting to Folklore, I believe it's called, in Belfast. So I might just have to go again. We'll see. And then the next day we headed north. And so the first place that we stopped was Derry. You saw the footage at the beginning of that. And we really stopped there to go to the Adele McBride store. And then from there we went up to Kilcar, where we were staying in a lovely Airbnb, really beautiful little old shepherd's cabin, which has been slightly enlarged and renovated, and it was just really beautiful, with a view of the sea from the I wanted to call it a cabin, but it's not really a cabin, from the little house. And it was really very close to Studio Donegal, actually. So we ended up arriving late on the Tuesday, and Wednesday morning we went that night to a place called the Rusty Mackerel was it the Rusty Mackerel? Yes, the Rusty Mackerel for dinner. And then the next morning we went into Kilcar on foot to have breakfast and to go to Studio Donegal. We spent a lot of time there. It was absolutely beautiful. And what I ended up getting there for myself was a sweater quantity of this yarn called Darnie, which is a fingering base. There you're getting the perfect color. I got 4 skeins. Now, I was intending to buy this for a shawl, and then I ended up buying a sweater quantity. This is the crazy thing that happens with me. I can't just walk away with 1 skein. I have to, or 2, I have to walk away with the possibility of making a sweater. But I had got this to make a large shawl by Isabel Kramer originally. What the heck is the name now? It's left my mind. I'll put it down here on the bottom. And ended up buying, I was going to buy 3, and then I thought, oh well, I'll just buy 4 just in case. So it's just a really beautiful dark blue. So we'll see what this ends up becoming. It's got that, it's a nice woolen spun, so it's really light and airy feeling, really, really nice. And then my arm was twisted, and I just ended up, they had these 2 little skeins of a more single ply tweed there, and I got those thinking that they could become part of a color work sweater, or they even really actually go very nicely with this. So we'll see what happens there. This is yarn that was actually weighed. So they had some yarns that were a price per skein, and then they had some yarns which were that were weighed, and this was like practically nothing. So that's how I'm justifying. It was practically nothing, and it cost practically nothing. And then they had bits of fabric that you could buy that were sort of in their extras bin. You can buy their fabric by the meter if you like, or their cloth that they weave there. So the weavers that you saw at the beginning of the video, they're actually weaving for Studio Donegal. And as you saw, there were pillows made precisely from the kind of weaving that they were doing. But you could buy just in their extras bin some fabric. So I got this fabric here in 1/2 meter. It's got blacks and browns. Thinking that it's a 1/2 meter. I'm thinking that I'll probably make myself a tote at some point. And then maybe the rest for a project bag. We'll have to see. But it was just so beautiful. Really, really stunning. And then there were these 2 other little bits that I got that I thought could be at the bottom of a bag, mixed with other fabric at the top. This is a very sort of more roughly woven cloth. They actually had a pillow in the shop that I think might have been made by this, that I was very drawn to and kept picking up, but I didn't end up buying it. And then this one here, which is a darker one. The cloths were so absolutely stunningly gorgeous, just absolutely beautiful. So when we had finished there, we actually ended up driving to Slieve League, which are the highest cliffs in Ireland, and that was just beautiful. The weather was really not very nice, but we still walked around and ended up finishing the day, our walk, with an Irish coffee, which I had never had, so I finally had an Irish coffee. And we also the next day went to Malin Head, which is, I think it's the most northern point of Ireland. It's also a spot where the last Star Wars was partly filmed. There's a scene from it. And now I actually want to watch Star Wars again to see exactly what was filmed there. So we ended up driving around a lot. We ended up stopping in a wonderful store called, oh dear, I'll have to put it down here. I think it was something like Donna Owen, or where I bought a beautiful Irish linen dress. And my goodness, they really do textiles so beautifully in that country. It was just, the linens were so beautiful, and the tweed wools were just absolutely stunning. So really, really a sight to see, a feast for the eyes, all the beautiful textures. We returned to Belfast, and then my last day, which was the next day, was spent going to the Giant's Causeway. We stopped at a place that's also was featured in the Game of Thrones. It's called the Dark Hedges, and it's a series, it's a walkway with trees that just go into one another, and it's just beautiful. Very touristic though. It's amazing. There's now, Game of Thrones tours that you can do of Ireland for those people who are so inclined. And so we saw that before going to the Giant's Causeway. We had lunch, and the Giant's Causeway was just wonderful, and we hiked all around there and had beautiful views of the sea and the cliffs, and so I'll be leaving you with some of that footage as well. And then the last thing I did before going back home and packing up to leave the next morning was we went to the Bushmills distillery, and I had a tasting of 3 different whiskeys and ended up coming home with a 12-year single malt from Bushmills, which it's a really beautiful Scotch. So that was a lot of fun. And then I left at an ungodly hour, for me anyway, on Saturday morning and got home. So it was a packed trip. It was absolutely wonderful. Ireland was so incredibly green and beautiful with stunning sights. I was amazed at the beauty. Like, you just could constantly look out the window and see beautiful, beautiful rolling hills or the ocean and sheep everywhere. And it was just absolutely, absolutely stunning. And people were chatty and friendly, and it was a very easy place to navigate. So many beautiful, beautiful things. Some beautiful cemeteries. We went to one on our way up towards Kilcar, called Saint, where there's a tombstone from about the 8th, 9th century, something like that, called Saint Mura, and that was absolutely beautiful. And yeah, it was just, the whole trip was just a feast for the eyes, and just really, really, really lovely. So that was my trip, and I think that might even conclude the podcast today. Next time I'll tell you a little bit about the books that I've been reading and so forth, but I think I'll leave it there for today. And you will be left with tons of footage. So if you want to watch it, please do. And I'll see you next time. Take care, and don't forget to comment below if you're interested in the prize of the beautiful Bijou Basin yarn. Ta-da! Take care, friends. Bye.
The most bombed hotels.
Say we might look drunk. Do you think we look drunk? No, you're perfectly sober.